So speaking of the America First platform, you say you're running on that platform. You've brought it up a couple times. So there's a couple things on the America First platform that I've been asked about personally.
Sure.
Just certain issues on there. So one of them is a temporary pause on legal immigration. Why?
So we got to be specific. We have to be specific. Legal immigration. I want a moratorium on any visa that takes a job away from Americans. So, because right now we have a crisis in our country with Americans not being able to obtain decent jobs because either there's too many incentives for them to stay at home and not work, and just the sheer fact that our country is not producing things any longer. So we need to tighten up the labor market in favor of sovereign Americans. So this is another, like, are we a free market that's essentially an open air bazaar that anyone can come and do commerce in, or are we actually a sovereign country? If people want to marry a foreigner, like you're an American and you go overseas, you fall in love, like you want to bring your wife back, like I'm fine with that, But these specific visas that are just designed to take away jobs from American citizens, that is wrong on every single level. Now, if there's some random guy out there that has the cure for cancer, in the same way that we brought Einstein over back in World War II, we can make an exception. But I reject the whole premise of, like, for instance, the H-1B visa system that brings over tech workers, because again, you have Americans, political leaders, a lot of Republicans too, that will say, well, Americans just can't do STEM anymore, so we have to bring in all these Pakistani kids. That's an absolute scam. They work at a rate of 3 to 1 compared to an American citizen. So it's just undercutting and hurting U.S. labor, which is why the corporate donor class, Wall Street, which is why they just say they love immigration left and right, which is why they want to open the borders up. Same thing on the low-skilled end, is they want to bring in unskilled labor that will undercut U.S. labor, and I think we just need to stop that.
Well, I mean, it's one of the Democrats' biggest talking points is that we need illegal immigration because they do the jobs that Americans won't do. I mean, I've picked strawberries. I've cleaned hotel rooms. I've done all these things that they say that we need them for. But yeah, I mean, back when I used to pick strawberries, we didn't have what we have today. And yeah, I totally agree with that. Like, it'd be nice to. I remember back during the recession, Georgia had a 18% unemployment rate, and people were like, "Well, we don't want to do it. We don't want to pick peaches." And it was during the whole the Arizona immigration law, and Georgia passed one right next to it. So Georgia was having a hard time finding immigrant workers.
Yep.
And yet, for some reason, with an 18% unemployment rate, they still couldn't find American workers to go pick peaches for. Back then, it was $15 an hour.
Yeah.
That was really good money. And they wouldn't do it because they said Americans were too good to do it. Well, that's because Americans have a whole lot of benefits to not be working and so on. So what would you do to kind of like maybe stop that a little bit? Because I think that's part of the culture change. It's so easy to just look at 2020. Everybody did this for an entire year.
Yeah, I mean, the left, the progressives, and the globalists, they want us dependent on the government. They want us hanging out, waiting for our stimulus check, not being any threat to them whatsoever, not accumulating enough capital to do things like get married, have our own kids, buy our own houses. They don't want us to do that. They essentially want us living in crummy apartments, not accumulating any wealth, and not reproducing. So what we need to do is cut off a lot of these essentially universal basic income programs. I mean, the COVID stimulus checks, those have to stop. The welfare for able-bodied people, that has to stop. But also a lot of the over-regulation, that's got to go away. I mean, I'm 42, and I remember working high school summer jobs, and that was like totally normal. That wasn't like a weird thing. And I think right now it's actually difficult to hire high school kids to go pick peaches, to go pick blueberries, to go do things that I think with enough cultural incentives of us saying, like, hey guys, this is honorable. If you go and you work in the field somewhere, eventually you'll be the guy that's, supervising the people, and then you'll work your way up and you can actually make a living this way. Like, this is an honorable, great thing to do. So deregulation, but I think also cultural shifts and cutting off that free money. There's no way any rational human's going to go to work when they can just receive free money, unfortunately.
Right. So a follow-up with that would be, what is your idea to stop illegal immigration? In other words, how would you fix those root causes that we keep on hearing about?
Yeah, the root causes. The first and foremost one, President Trump was right. Build the wall, finish the wall. We already paid for it. Republicans like Jamie Herr, Butler, when we had control of the White House, we had the House, we had the Senate, they voted to stop construction of the border wall. And I went down there with Paul Gosar, Yuma, Arizona, and we saw where all of the materials that we paid for are laying out in the desert, collecting dust, illegal immigrants are walking around it, over it, into our country. So build the wall, finish the wall is key. Something else that we can do is offensively use the threat of tariffs against South American countries that don't force their own borders, and then also threaten to withhold foreign aid to those countries. That's something that Trump did really quickly. He threatened, hey, I'm going to start tariffing everything coming from Mexico if you guys don't stop the caravans. Well, what do you know? The wall wasn't even built and the caravans stopped. So I think that's absolutely key. But then on our side of the border, I would even deploy the military down there, because I think what the cartel is doing, the way the cartel is taking over large swaths of the border, I mean, we have members of the Texas and Arizona National Guard that are getting shot at by the cartel, and they can't shoot back. Yet we have neocons in our national security state that want to send us over to go fight in Ukraine for some reason, but we have like a foreign country, a foreign terrorist organization shooting at our troops on the border. So I'd be just fine, as much of a non-war guy as I am, I would be just fine with us sending our military down there. On our side of the border, we have to get very tough on people that are hiring illegal immigrants, mandatory e-verify. We have to cut off illegal immigrants from any kind of social welfare benefit. We have to crack down on sanctuary cities, Portland, yes, Seattle, all these sanctuary cities. Like, there's no reason why these sanctuary cities should be receiving a penny of federal aid. Like, if they want to do their thing and not enforce any laws, that's fine, but our taxpayer dollars shouldn't be going to them. I think if we did that, if we made it impossible for most illegal immigrants who've come up, especially in this last wave, the 3 million that we think have come, most of these people, like, yeah, there's definitely some bad people. There's the cartel, there's the violence, there's stuff that makes the headlines, and rightfully so, because it's horrible. But most of these people are rational. They were told, hey, they could get a decent paying job up in America, and we have a great social welfare system. If we cut those things off, they can't get jobs, they can't get access to our social welfare. I think a lot of them are just going to self-deport. Something else I think we have to do is we have to get rid of birthright citizenship. Like, I think you have to be born to an actual legal American for yourself to become an American, or go through our immigration process. The whole concept that you can just come here and have a baby, and then boom, the baby's an American, and then now we have the DACA thing, where we've created this, the kid becomes the golden ticket to coming in and becoming an American citizen. It's a really, I mean, it sounds nice when you say it, but it's really a perverse incentive for using a child to get across the border as your way to become an American. So I think getting rid of all those vectors right there is key for illegal immigration.
So you're a big states' rights guy, big 10th Amendment guy. What about some of these states and cities that are starting to allow illegals to vote,
yeah,
giving, like Oregon allows illegals to have a driver's license? I think Washington might too. Yeah. There's a couple states and municipalities around the country that are giving non-citizens citizen rights. I mean, they can't vote in federal elections, but like, who's going to count that? But so where does that line exist when it comes to, let's say, Oregon says, well, we want illegals to be able to vote, we want illegals to be able to do all these, get all the benefits. But is that a states' right issue, or is that a federal issue?
I don't think that's a states' rights issue at all. I mean, the states have a lot of leeway in what they can do, but when it comes to voting, especially in federal elections, or receiving any federal funds, I think there would have to be something where, Oregon or Washington or whatever state said that we're going to do all these things. We're going to let illegals essentially get social security numbers and vote. I think we would have to do something very draconian, like cutting off all the federal funding from them and just saying, like, no, you can't do that. And then we'd have to have some form of a discussion of, like, do we count this state's votes? I think that's very realistic, and I think we need a national standard. I don't want the federal government to control federal elections. I want the states to still control that, but there does need to be some form of a national ID standard so that we know that actual eligible U.S. citizens are voting in our elections. The manner of how those elections are conducted, I think the states should have some leeway on. Because I don't want HR1, SR1, where the federal government runs the whole thing, because that's essentially what happened in 2020. But yeah, so a federal national ID, I think, is a good way to go. But if the states are going to continue to really, I would say, assault the sovereignty of America, the federal government does have to push back. Cutting off funding would be the first one, but then even, I mean, if states are just going to start registering all these illegal immigrants to vote, like, do we count those votes? I don't know what the right answer there is, but it needs to be looked at.
Right. And my last question about the America First thing is, in there it says that marriage needs to be between one man and one woman only. Me personally, I think that government should get completely out of marriage. I think that we should have contracts. So, like, if two dudes want to have a contract that says, if I'm in the hospital dying, then you can make my final decision.
Yeah.
Pretty much what the government contract of marriage is. So I personally have a little kind of an issue with that, because I believe that government needs out of marriage. Like, if two people want to hang out, it doesn't, or get the contract, more power to them.
Sure.
Live your life the way you want to, live and let live, kind of a thing. So what's really your stance on the marriage between one man and one woman on a legal standpoint? Because if you put that in a platform, that kind of sounds like somebody wants to make a law saying that marriage needs to be between a man and a woman.
Yeah.
And whereas me personally, I think marriage belongs in the church as a ceremony, and then the government just stays the heck out of it entirely.
Yeah, I actually have never been asked before. I didn't include the marriage thing on my website. I would agree with you. I just don't see what the government has, other than a taxing purpose, what the government has to do with marriage. So if two people of the same sex want to get married, I really don't care. That's on the church. I don't think the federal government. I think the whole idea of going and getting a marriage license is really weird. Like, what are you doing with the marriage license? Like a car license or something like that? It's
Right.
just, I don't know what the federal government, the state government, the local government has to do with it. So yeah, contracts I would agree with. I do think we need to defend. I think we need to defend, as far as the transgender issue goes. It does become a slippery slope, and so there are a lot of people on the conservative side that would say that all this drift started when we didn't defend marriage anymore, and when we passed laws that people of the same sex could get married. I understand that argument. I just, like you, I want the government out of all that, but I think we need to defend male and female spaces and gender roles.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight